Well, hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to everyone to today's webinar on how you can slash your JD Edwards EnterpriseOne testing effort by up to 85%. Now, my name is David Hunt, and I'm the Strategy Director here at DWS. We're an Oracle Gold Partner specialized in JD Edwards EnterpriseOne. I'm joined today in this session by Pierre Bodenstein, and he's one of our very experienced senior solutions architects. So if you would like to raise any questions about any aspect of testing or upgrading EnterpriseOne, then we will have time at the end of the session to answer them. Just use the questions pane in your dashboard to the right of your screen. Now, there is a white paper available to download whilst you're connected up today, and if you look on your dashboard to the right of your screen, you'll see there's a section there on handouts, and there is a white paper called Functional Testing Options for JD Edwards EnterpriseOne, and do feel free to download that during the course of today's session. Now, if we look at the typical EnterpriseOne life cycle, there are three major phases. There's the initial implementation phase, the major upgrade phase, then the realization that staying code current might actually represent a more sensible approach than undertaking major upgrade projects every 5 to 10 years. Now, a key element of every stage of the life cycle is testing, which is what we will be concentrating on today. Now, Carnegie Mellon research indicates that in a typical software project, software testing typically amounts to between 30 and 5% of the project. The feedback from major EnterpriseOne upgrade projects indicates that software testing can actually amount to some 65% of the total upgrade effort. Now, because of the complexity of ERP applications like EnterpriseOne, it's impractical to try to test every single aspect of your implementation. Software testing, therefore, is a bit like an insurance policy. You evaluate the risks, you decide how much cover or protection you want or need to provide, then decide how much you're prepared to pay in terms of effort and money to offset that risk. Now, there are some testing solution options out there in the marketplace, but despite these options being available, research that DWS carried out just over a year ago showed that many users still resorted to manual testing rather than use existing solutions. So we asked people why. Now, it turns out that the current testing options available have their own problems, with the top issues being the need for specialist staff, the fact that changes to the code will require complex changes to the testing solution, testing is too time-consuming and far too complex. Now, before developing the two applications that we're going to show you today, DWS conducted research amongst more than 100 EnterpriseOne customers to find out what was important to them and what would make a new testing solution be of interest. And this is what they told us. And I'll give you a moment to review this list. Now, we plan to address the top 5 issues in today's presentation and demonstrations. So what we're going to address in the agenda today is look at planning your E1 testing and then managing your E1 testing. And in both areas, we'll be looking at some of the key challenges that people face with their EnterpriseOne systems. And then we move on to how we can slash your testing effort and at the same time improve and increase your quality. Now, when we're talking about planning testing and managing testing, we will include in there some short demonstrations of some typical testing scenarios to give you a good feel for what's actually involved and how you can apply best practices to your testing efforts. And we'll have time at the end for Q&A, so do feel free to raise any questions. You'll see again in your dashboard to the right of the screen, there's a questions box. If you'd like to enter your questions in there, then we'll monitor those and review those at the end of today's session. Now, the biggest dilemma facing your quality assurance team is how to identify precisely what needs testing. Now, to do this, you need to know exactly what has changed in the ESUs you're installing, which objects those changed ESUs affect, and to be able to identify all the dependencies in your E1 system from all of the affected objects, so you can truly understand the full impact of those changes. Now, once you have identified the full impact of those changes, you need to assess by how much any object has been affected, so you can determine how thoroughly you need to test each individual object. Equally important, you need to be clear regarding what does not need testing, because that's where you're going to save time. You don't want to be wasting time, effort, and money testing things that have not been impacted at all. So I'd like to introduce you first of all to a product we launched last year at DWS called Dimension Focus. Now, what we want to try to do is to reduce the amount of testing that you need to do after applying Oracle software updates, or ESUs as they are more commonly known, or after making your own modifications to your E1 system. Now, this is where Dimension Focus can help, because it enables you to identify those programs that will be affected the most by applying the software updates. And these are the programs that you would consequently need to give the maximum amount of testing time to. It will also identify the programs that have not been affected, which you can be confident, therefore, require only minimal testing or no testing at all. Now, Dimension Focus works by investigating the programs that you use and how they will be affected by the ESUs. Now, let's assume for simplicity for today's presentation that all the programs that you're using are the ones on the screen now. Now, of course, you'd have a lot more than that in reality, but we're just using this to actually describe how the application actually works. Dimension Focus has the ability to analyze the lower level objects that are used by these programs. So, for example, all the tables, the business views, and the business functions, etc. Now, Dimension Focus also knows about the interdependencies between these objects, and it can build up a multi-level hierarchy of how they are all interlinked. We can then identify those objects that would be directly changed as a result of installing the ESUs. So these are the objects that Oracle has modified. This could be as small as 5% of the total number of objects in your system. We have even seen in smaller amounts being affected than that. So even if you're installing a large number of ESUs, the amount affected could still be quite small. Because of the cumulative nature of ESUs, just because an object is included in an ESU, it does not necessarily mean that it has changed compared to the version of the object that you currently have installed. It doesn't matter though, because Dimension Focus can figure all of that out, and it will exclude any objects that haven't actually changed. Using our knowledge of the interdependencies, we can also identify the top-level programs that are affected by changes in the lower-level objects. So, for example, here we have the business function that's been modified by Oracle. This might affect the way that the business function above it will run, and the same for the business function above that until we get to the top level. So now we know that we also need to test this program, since it could be affected by the changes lower down. But if we do that for all of the objects, then we can build up a complete picture of all the programs to be tested. However, it also enables you to get a list of the programs that have not been affected by the ESUs. What this does is to potentially reduce the number of programs that need to be retested by giving you the reassurance that they have not been impacted at all at the code level by any changes that Oracle has made or that you've made in your own modifications. So I'd like to hand over now to Pierre, who will give you a short demonstration of how Dimension Focus really saved you a lot of testing effort by helping you focus just on what needs to be tested. So Pierre, over to you.
Thanks, David. I'll just display my screen. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So before we get into the product, what I would like to do is maybe just go through some of the object statistics that we can analyze. So when we look at object, we glibly refer to a journal entry application or a purchase order application, 0911 or 4310. What we need to realize is that those applications are made up of multiple forms. So if you look there at 911, it contains 9 forms, and that's 9 opportunities of change that an ESU can change. And on those 9 forms, there's 101 sections. So that's OK button clicked, column exited, form control loaded. So all these different types of events are opportunities of change that an ESU can affect when we apply an ESU. Same if we look at 4310 there, 350 sections. So if we apply an ESU, you can see how scary it looks to try and go and test these applications and the breadth and width of the impact of these changes. So that's why we at DWS went and developed the product called Dimension Focus. So right now you can see it's the landing page of Dimension Focus, and each change event that's been uploaded and submitted to us for analysis, we create change event projects. So you'll see there we've got 4 quadrants on the screen. So the top left-hand quadrant is a cumulative ESU change event. So the CNC has sent us a couple of ESUs that they want to apply, and we need to analyze what the impact is of those ESUs that needs to be applied to the environment, considering the customizations and everything else inside of the environment. If we look on the left bottom quadrant, you'll see there's a modification project. So we don't just analyze ESUs and cumulative ESUs from Oracle. We have the ability to intercept customizations, which we refer to as mods mode. So if your own in-house developer is making a change to the environment and they promote it through normal JD Edwards change control, i.e. OW, we intercept those changes through the promotion path, and we can analyze those changes, and we can tell you forensically what the impact is of these changes that's been promoted in your environment. So this is like a dashboard and home central of all the change events that's coming through. So by clicking on the detail screens of one of those change event projects, I start getting some nice features and information about what's happening in this change event. So it will tell me in which system code and system area it's been affected, and which section of JDE has been affected. It's giving me a suggested burn down path of, if I test, what my estimated time for completion would be. My personal favorite is these 2 donuts. So if we pause and have a look at the left-hand side donut just for a second, what it's doing here, it's looking at all the objects that's been selected as part of the change event, and it analyzes to decide which ones need to be tested and which ones do not. So we can see here 54% of the objects that's been selected to be part of this change event does not need to be tested. So how do we know that? This is purely by looking at the date and timestamp of the objects and comparing that to your environment. So we can eliminate objects that potentially has already been applied to your environment. But we don't just look at the date and timestamp. We also go and look at the properties, the binaries, the event rule codes of those objects. So we'll do a spec comparison between the change that you want to apply and what your environment's got. So that's the way that we can eliminate straight out of the gate. 45% only needs to be tested now. So that's already starting to show you the savings. So you're not wasting time on objects that didn't even change. If we look at the right-hand side donut, it's just giving us our 10,000 foot view of the overall system. So we can see that this change event over here is only going to impact about 4.5%, let's call it 5% of my overall system. So this is very useful if you want to know what the severity is of this change event that you're busy embarking on. So if you're seeing on the right-hand side donut something like a 15, 25 to 30% impact, you know that you need to start assigning serious resources to this change, because it's going to affect quite a large portion of your environment. Scrolling down just to the bottom, just linking back to what David was talking about, we've extracted all the ESU information of this change event. So here's the listing of the actual objects that was part of the change event and in which ESU it's been shipped. So that's important for us to know, because we will go and build our own cross-reference with our own IP to figure out what the real interdependencies between these objects are, like Dave was explaining just now. So we can see here there's a couple of business functions, a couple of data structures, and a few apps. Right, if we go and click on the testing heat map over there, now we're getting into some nice detail about this change event. So what we've got here on this dashboard over here is we've got different views of looking at the change event. So I'm currently on the master parents view, but you can go and view all the ESU objects that's been affected. You can go and see all new objects that's potentially been shipped. My personal favorite is the master parent tab. So the best way to explain the master parent tag is this is the most logical place for a business analyst / tester to see which object has been affected by this change event directly or indirectly. Good. Think about it. When a business function is part of the change event, you don't go and test the business function. You go and test the impact and the ramification of the change of that business function on the functionality of JDE. So Focus has now showed us, if you look here on the left-hand side, all the applications that's been affected by this change event, which might not even have been part of the ESU. Indirectly, it's already telling us which ones we need to go and focus on. A nice feature of this dashboard, which test managers use, is they can go and slice and dice and group different objects to different people and champions to test in the environment. So if I've got a finance champion, I might assign all the AP objects to my finance guy to test, and maybe all my procurement. So I can search by different system codes if I wanted to. So I could say, please show me all the system code 33s, and I could say all these objects needs to be tested by Lee. So as simple as that, I've now assigned as a test manager these objects for Lee. When he logs on, he only needs to go and look at these objects for him to go and test. That's quite useful. We can also extract your securities and your roles. So if you wanted to filter out what's all the applications that's been assigned to the AP clock, or to the finance manager, or to the procurement manager, I can search by role and assign them to my different champions. So if we assume I'm the tester, so I'm logging on to this dashboard, I'm saying please show me all the objects that the test manager has assigned to me. You can see there I've been given the purchase order application, ledger application, and a couple of reports. What's useful for me as a tester, if I just scan a little bit to the right, I'm seeing a testing score. So the red testing score is telling me that this application has been severely impacted by this change event. Amber means a little bit less, and green is benign. So you know how much effort you should be dedicating to the test event. So as the tester, I would just go and click on the application to go and find out the details of this test and change event. Right. So straight immediately, what you'll see, I'll zoom in a little bit that you can see, I've clicked on the purchase order application, P4310. It's telling me that this is an execution point, i.e. a business analyst / tester or super user can access this application from a menu or from the fast path. We also provide the menu tree structure if you were to click the little boxes on the left-hand side. If we look to the right, you'll see the first node which says Form G, which is work with order details. Remember just now I was mentioning that 4310 has got something like 12 or 13 forms that could be affected by the change. Well, Focus has now already told me that only one form has been affected. So that means the other 12 I don't need to worry about. I can focus all my effort only to this one form. So it's given me what not to test. If I pop that node to tell me what's the details, let me zoom out that you can see overall. So you can see there's 4 sections or events that's been affected by this change. Let me zoom in so you can see the details that we provide. So I can see now, as the business analyst, on this work with details form, when capturing a purchase order, the sub-ledger section has been affected by a change event. So when I'm testing purchasing, I need to be sure not to test a basic purchase order with no financial information, because I would have missed the impact of the change event. What Focus has now given me nice insight into, be sure to test a purchase order with sub-ledger information, because that's where the change happened. If we look to the right, we're now finally getting to the actual changed objects. So these red nodes over here is the actual ESU ship changed object. So these are the guys that's been changed and affected by this event. I can easily pop the binoculars and it then will take me through to the ESU information. So from there I can click on JM18071 and it will give me a hot link into Oracle Update Center to provide me with the bug information. So I've gone into Oracle Update just to go and see what the change is. And what Oracle has done on this ESU is they fixed the subledger validation. So previously you could enter any garbage into the subledger field and it would just allow you to proceed. So this validation, bug fix or enhancement, whichever way you want to see it, is now preventing you from putting rubbish into your subledger field, validating that against the subledger type. Quite useful and nifty. So I can focus my efforts now on where I should be doing my testing and not wasting time on stuff that didn't change. The same with financials. So I can see here with journal entry, lo and behold, subledger validation has been affected. So you can see how I'm now going to gear my testing events, what I should be focusing my efforts on. So in summary, what I want to show you is if we just look at the high level, 0911 had 9 forms, but Dimension Focus has now told us that you only need to test 1 form and 2 sections. The same example for 4310, where it had 13 forms, but only 1 form has been affected and only 4 sections. You can see how this is helping us, saving huge amounts of time and efforts on our test planning and test efforts. Thanks, Dave.
Well, thanks very much for that demonstration there. And every time that I see the Dimension Focus product being demonstrated, it just impresses me more and more. We keep adding new functionality in there to make things more powerful for people, and there really is nothing else on the market that can do anything like what Dimension Focus can do. So it really is a very impressive product. We're now going to switch our attention to the actual testing itself. We've been working on the planning side of things. We're now going to look at some of the key challenges to actually functionally testing our system. So I'm going to drill a little deeper into some of the key challenges and considerations when it comes to the functional testing of your E1 upgrade. Now, clearly the first challenge is to identify just what needs testing and what does not, so you don't waste a lot of time and effort unnecessarily, and that's what we've just been talking about with the Dimension Focus product. The next challenge relates to making sure that your library of test scenarios or your test cases is actually up to date. And this would be dependent on the analysis that identified what has changed and what has not changed. And you're going to need to identify which objects add totally new functionality that offer maybe opportunities to perform some business processes in a different and more efficient way. And these new processes will require new test scenarios to be created. For any objects that have been impacted by the changes Oracle has made, you'll need to either modify any existing test scenarios you created previously or create new test scenarios if you don't have an existing test script or model. But even if you do have an existing test script for whatever test solution you may be using currently, you have to think, just how easy is it to modify those tests? How easy is it to test the changes that you've made to those scripts? After all, a test script often requires highly technical test programmers to program the test scripts, so they need testing too. Now, it's quite common to find that existing tests can be extremely difficult and time-consuming to update, even to cope with quite simple changes to the user interface. You then need to think about what resources are available to help create the test scenarios. Are you using a testing tool that requires expensive and scarce specialist test engineers to develop the scripts required? Or are you relying on manual testing that requires many key end users to manually run through their business processes on the new version of E1? Either way, testing can become a resource bottleneck and requires careful planning. When it comes to executing the tests, you need to focus your testing effort on the code that's been affected by the changes in the new ESUs, or even in the code that you've changed yourselves. You also need to consider how thoroughly you need to test each object. Is the change, for example, just the repositioning of a yes-no dialog box, in which case the testing required will be very simple? On the other hand, if the changes have a profound impact on a number of objects in a process, that process will require much more thorough testing. If you're relying on manual testing and bugs are identified, these will need to go back to the development team to be fixed. Your developers will need to know exactly what the user did and what happened or did not happen as expected. He will require screenshots to help him. Once he's carried out the fix, this will need to be retested by the users. And this cycle may need to be repeated several times until the code is performing correctly. The problem with this approach is that each time it goes back to the user for retesting, it is taking up more of the user's time. So he or she will probably be less diligent with the testing on each testing cycle. This could result in bugs creeping through to the live production environment with potentially serious consequences. Regression testing is the process of testing changes to computer programs to make sure that the older programming still works with the new changes. Now, this has been a basic requirement of software testing, as up till now it has not been possible to identify if any E1 custom code is unaffected by changes or not. With the sheer volume of potential testing that may be required with the subsequent cycles of fixes and retesting, it is very important to keep accurate track of what has been tested satisfactorily and what still requires a final testing and sign-off. So we'd now like to introduce you to the second product in today's session, which is Dimension Swiftest. This is a product that we've developed to actually manage and automate your testing. And I'm going to hand back to Pierre now, who's going to take you through a scenario of testing where we're going to execute a test, fix the problem that it identified, and then complete the test so it's all been signed off. So Pierre, just making you the presenter again.
Thanks, Dave. Right, so the idea behind Swiftest is to mimic the actions that you can perform inside of E1. And the key focus was to make sure that it is easy to use, easy to maintain, and easy to edit. So we were aiming towards the business analyst type. So if you can do something inside of JDE, we're confident that you will be able to do it inside of Dimension Swiftest. So I've logged onto the application here, which you can see is docked to the right-hand side. It's a small little application, it's about 15 megabytes, that gets installed inside of your environment. It gets deployed to a workstation, a notebook, a virtual machine, even to Citrix terminal server if you want. It does not have to be deployed to a fat client because we actually read the HTML code, and I'll show you that right now. So linking on from what we saw just now, where we saw Focus telling us that you need to go and test the subledger section because that's the issue that's been changed. So I will go inside of Swiftest and I'll go and look at the catalog of scripts that's available. So I've got a whole bunch of scripts that me as a business analyst have gone and created. So I've got a bunch of GL scripts by capturing a journal, approving and posting and reversing and voiding and all different GL type of transactions that I've created, which I can go and use during a change event. But I can group them according to accounts payable, receivable, fixed assets, or procurement as well. Right, so for our scenario over here, I've copied some of the scripts that's impacting by this change into a test project, which I now can go and execute and see how the results are. So if I go and choose a GL journal with subledger information as part of my test, because remember, DF, Dimension Focus, told me watch out for the subledger. So there you can see this script is logging on to JD Edwards and it will go and execute the script for me with subledger information. So I think it's easier if I just launch up the script and let it execute, and then I can talk through as JDE is progressing forward. So the first thing that happens is Dimension Swiftest starts on the right hand side. So if you look at the actions section over there, that's instructions that Swiftest is sending to JDE. You'll notice on the left hand side it started up a browser session and it's fired up and it went to a specific URL that I provided, including my testing environment, and passed in some credentials. Then what it's doing is performing actions that I've told it to do, i.e. open up the journal application 0911, go and enter in a GL date. I've soft-coded the GL date because we know the period constantly moves forward. And then you can see it's busy entering information into the grid format. Okay, so now look what happened there. This script previously worked fine, but I had garbage in my subledger field where I typed in the guy's username and not his address book number. Now that this ESU has been applied to my environment, that garbage is not acceptable anymore. I need to put in the appropriate values. So now I can go and fix the script that I've got. But I don't have to go and recreate this whole script from scratch. I can just go and fix that one event. So what I would do inside of Dimension Swiftest now is create new action. So when I click create new action, what Swiftest on the right hand side is doing, it's reading the JDE screen on the left hand side, and it's giving me controls and forms and events and actions that's available for me to perform. So what I want to go and do is I want to go and change that field over there in JDE where the subledger is with the address book number. So I would say enter a grid value. So by clicking the grid value, what DS is doing, you can see there it's selected the grid and it's reading all the columns that's available for me to use. So if I click on select column, you can see there all the different columns that it's brought back. Important point here, it's not returning the funny HTML ID tags or Java parameters or data dictionaries or anything like that. It's bringing back human readable and human understandable values that I can use. So you can see how we're aiming towards the business analyst or super user to use this. You don't need to know Java coding or anything like that. It's normal human understandable language. So I'm saying I want to change the subledger value there. I want to go and update the first row over there, and I'm going to put in Alan's address book number, which is 6001, and say execute. So what you'll see, look there on the JDE screen on the left hand side, it's entered in that command for me. So I've got that now inside of my script. So what I would go and do now, that new command has been added to the end of my script. So what I would go and do is just change the position in a logical fashion to say, well, that happens there. Instead of typing in the name, as you can see over there, I want to enter the address book number, and I go click save. So all I now need to go and do is remove the mistaken command, which was entering the name. So I can go and delete that out of my script, and it won't write in Alan anymore. It will now only enter in 6001, which is Alan's address book number. Right. My finance consultants taught me well, and that I know there's always two legs to a journal. So if I made the mistake on my first leg, I most probably made the same mistake on my second leg. So what I want to go and do here is just show you, you don't need to go and perform the JDE action. I just showed you so you can see the navigation and the action between Swiftest and JDE. But a much easier way to edit a script is I'll just go and hit the pencil, and I can go and update the values that I put in. Instead of Alan, I can just say enter 6001, which is Alan's address book number. It's as easy as that. So I clean up that last mistake, and now I'm pretty confident if I say execute script, it will now run through, and let's hope, if I did my job correctly, that it's updated my script correctly and will perform the commands that we want. So again, you can see there, logging on to JDE, it's providing me who's logged on to which environment. After this, I'll show you the audit information that we actually record for each and every execution of the script. So when you see this little green tick box happening inside of Dimension Swiftest, you know that the command has been sent to JDE, the command has been accepted, and the audit information has been recorded. At the same time, we're doing screen prints, and we're sending that up to the hub as well, which I'll show you. Right, if we look to the right-hand side of Dimension Swiftest, you can see the execution detail. It's just giving you an explanation of what's busy happening at the moment. And if you look at the bottom, you see the progress bar. So as it's busy stepping through all the different commands. So this is just nice, useful information if you wanted to see how the script is busy progressing, if you wanted to do some troubleshooting and erroring. But remember, when we go and create a script, we're not going to create it and watch it run all the time. We just want to see the results. So, by the way, if you'll notice, look at the JDE screen. It's updated the 6001 into the subledger field. So that script has now been corrected. So I'm very happy that my editing has worked. So I don't have to go and recreate this whole script from scratch. I just went to where the mistaken area is and just fixed that. So you can see how you've got a lot of saving on editing and maintaining, and how easy it is to update these kind of scripts. Right, so it's about to go and finish off the script now. A nice feature, if you look at the next command where it says store batch value, so the batch number, as you know, when you're creating transactions in JDE, the data is a living organism. It's moving forward all the time. So we've got the ability inside of Dimension Swiftest to grab information from one script and then handshake and pass it on to another script. So this is quite useful. Imagine this. I go and create a script just to capture a requisition. And then I go and create a script to go and approve this requisition, and then go and convert it to a PO and receive and match and pay. So all these little tests I can go and create, which I can use in different permutations. But with the dynamic data store that we've developed, that grabbing of the information from one script, you can pass and consume in the next script. That enables you now to build business processes where one script can connect to the next, i.e. procure to pay, order to cash. So any business process you want, you can now go and build inside of Dimension Swiftest. If I take you back to the hub, what we've got now is we can mark off that I've now fixed my script inside of Dimension Focus to say I've successfully executed that script, and I can now mark this section as tested. So what I would go and do in the application is say mark this application 0911 as tested. So why do I do that? Remember the testing manager that I talked about just now, and he's assigned objects to me to test. So he does not need to come and bug me to ask me, how am I doing? Am I progressing? Am I stuck? Do I need help? He can log on to this dashboard, this heat map, and he can see the objects that's been assigned to me, and he can see my progress. So as I'm busy testing and marking objects down as tested, he can see my progress. So at a high level, he can see us moving forward. One last thing that I wanted to show you is just quickly the auditing. So if I go back into Swiftest on the hub, I can see all of the test events that we've done. So if I go into that project that I've just showed you, there's our demo project over there. And if I click on that test over there, it's showing me the execution detail. What date, what time it's been executed. Something else that it's showing me is all the metadata that I was talking about. Environment, user, which application, which date has been used, which object accounts has been used. So if I've got different permutations and variations in my environment, I want to make sure that all of them have been tested. And the best for me is if you click on any of these steps, it actually shows you the screen print of that event right there and then. So I can see there that the batch that was created for the script was 8919. So you can see a great audit requirements that get met here to provide and prove that you actually did perform those tests. So just in quick summary, so we've got Dimension Focus that told us which sections we need to go and focus our efforts on. We then used Dimension Swiftest to go and execute. The test failed. We knew where it failed. We knew how to go and correct it. And then by correcting that in the end, we now have successfully done a negative test, fixed it without recreating everything from scratch. Thanks, Dave.
Well, thanks again, Pierre. Uh, really is quite a fantastic demo that you do there. And hopefully for the people that are with us today, for those of you that are currently testing Enterprise One manually, hopefully you can start to gain an appreciation of just how easy it is going to be to test your system by using the products we've been showing you today. And if you are already using some other testing tool to do the test management of your system, hopefully you can actually appreciate just how much easier and simpler it is using the Swiftest product that Pierre has just demonstrated to you. Now, Pierre has really just given you a very brief high-level introduction to what the product can do. It can do so much more, but the objective today was not to do an in-depth product demonstration, but to really try and highlight some of the key challenges that you're having to address when it comes to testing your E1 system. If you want to get a customer's perspective on some of this, we are running another webinar on February the 15th, where we have a customer that's been using Swiftest in anger for the past year, and they can actually show you how they're using it and go through some of the benefits that they've derived from using the Swiftest product. And they really do give us quite glowing testimonials because they are so thrilled by how it's helping them with their testing. Just to summarize briefly what we've covered so far, looking at the two products, I mentioned Focus first of all. That was the product for actually helping you to identify what needs testing and what does not need testing. And the key benefits of that is that there's just no other tool on the market that actually helps you to identify down to the detail that we can provide exactly what has been impacted by any upgrade or any code changes that you've actually made. And nothing else can identify what has not been affected, and nothing else gives you a heat map as to how thoroughly you need to actually conduct any testing. This alone is going to save you huge amounts of time, even if you are using another test automation solution for the actual testing itself. It will still help you to get better value out of that tool, because we have found that some ESUs only impact only 5% of the system, so immediately you can avoid 95% potential testing effort on that. Looking at the Swiftest product that Pierre has just demonstrated, hopefully you appreciate that with this tool there is no need for specialist testing people. You don't need specialist test programmers writing scripts and using HTML and Java. And it has been designed specifically for use with Enterprise One. So as you saw from the demonstration, it sits side by side and it's actually interacting with Enterprise One live on the screen. It's very quick and easy to set up tests, and as you saw from the demonstration, very, very simple to edit the test. You don't have to go back and re-record a whole test case all over again. You can just edit the one thing that needs changing and then bang away and start the retesting solution. And because of the way you're setting things up, where it's actually showing you what's available to you within Enterprise One at every step of the way, you've got far less chance of making any mistakes when you're setting up your test. So it's going to save you an awful lot of time. So hopefully it's going to be starting to become fairly clear how we're going to be able to slash your testing effort. And how much effort you're going to save with each of the products will depend on the kind of situation that you're in. So if we're going to look at where the products will have the maximum impact on your testing effort as individual products, then it will depend on whether you're deploying a very simple ESU uplift or whether you're going through a major upgrade. If we look first of all at Dimension Focus, now that's not going to make so much saving for you when you're performing a major version upgrade, because the high probability is that the majority of your system is going to be affected by a major system upgrade. So you're probably going to end up testing pretty much the whole lot anyway. But when you're getting down to doing smaller uplifts or your own code modifications, then the chances are it's only going to be something like 5%, maybe even less of your system is impacted. So that's all you need to test. So the potential savings are absolutely huge. When it comes to Swiftest, on the other hand, you're going to get good savings on your testing setup and management at all levels of upgrades. But these savings grow the more that you need to test. So the more testers that you have, the more frequently you have to do testing, the bigger the savings are going to be from using the Swiftest product. If we look at how this actually works throughout the life cycle of implementing and upgrading EnterpriseOne, well, Dimension Focus, I think, is pretty clear that every time you're doing a minor upgrade, it's going to save you huge amounts of effort because it's reducing the amount that you actually need to test. It may not be quite so clear just how big the savings are going to be from the demonstration that you've just seen. So let's look at, first of all, at a manual approach to actually testing your system. You apply one or more ESUs to your E1 system, or you make modifications to the standard code. In order to test this, you need to manually run through the whole process, recording what you do and documenting the correct results. When you find any bugs, these need to be fixed by your developers. Now, once the bugs have been fixed, you need to rerun the test manually again, which takes the same amount of time as before, maybe even a little longer, as you may need to check and compare the results that you're seeing. And you may have to repeat this process several times until the software is clean. Some weeks or maybe months later, you make some more mods and apply another ESU. So again, you need to manually create or recreate your scripts, document them and the expected results, and report any bugs to be fixed. Once fixed, you then have to manually rerun those tests and check the results. And so it goes on, time and time again. Let's see how it works using Dimension Swiftest. The Swiftest, as you've seen, is integrated with EnterpriseOne, and you have your Swiftest and E1 applications open side by side on your screen. Swiftest guides you through your options throughout any business process, and it enables you to quickly and error-free create your test scenarios. Now, at this stage, in all reality, there are not huge savings on time to be made, because you're still having to go through and actually create the whole process. But as Swiftest keeps track of what the user does and it stores the results, you don't actually need to spend time documenting your tests. Once any bugs have been fixed, you just resubmit the appropriate test or tests to the test queue and run automatically. But even if you do need to make changes to your test scenario, editing your test, as you've seen, is very, very quick and easy process. So every time you have to go through this retesting process, you're actually saving pretty close to 100% of the equivalent manual process. So your savings really do start to mount up the more testing that you do. And so it goes on. Every time you make mods or you apply ESUs, you're saving you time and time every step of the way, again and again and again. So there really are some potential for some really big financial savings to you and a great return on investment. And again, if we look at testing the system manually, I'm going to assume that to do things manually, it's 100% of effort, because regardless of whether you're a small project, a large project, whatever the amount of effort is going to be, you're going to require X amount of man days. Using the Dimension Focus product, you'll be able to identify just what needs to be tested and what does not need to be tested. Now, as you've seen from some of the examples when Pierre was showing you Dimension Focus, some of the ESUs only impact 5%, but we're going to be very, very cautious here and very conservative on our estimates, and we're going to assume that overall, over a lifetime of a project, 25% of your code may actually still need to be tested. Using the Dimension Swiftest product to generate your test scenarios and run your tests, again, we're being very, very conservative. We're going to assume that it's going to save you overall throughout the whole lifetime of your EnterpriseOne system about 40% of the effort. So there's only 60% of effort is going to be required. Again, I mentioned that's been very conservative. But if you think about it, that is 60% of 25% that Dimension Focus identified actually needs to be tested. So the amount of effort you're now going to spend testing comes down to just 15%. So potentially you're going to save very conservatively up to 85% in man days on your testing effort. What does this mean in monetary terms? Well, I've got some customer examples here. I've got 3 different customer profiles. This first one is a very small JD Edwards user with just 220 users. They've got 2 people in IT doing testing with 1 person from the end user community helping out. And over a 3-year period, they spend just under 400 days testing in total. Now, their usage scenario is that in the first year they go through a major upgrade and then they perform either a code current event or just do code modifications during the remaining 2 years. And the return on investment they're going to get after allowing for the cost of the software subscriptions, that they're going to save over $50,000. A small saving, but it is a very, very small testing environment. The next customer has over 1,100 JD Edwards users. They've got 10 testers in IT and 10 end user testers. And over a 3-year period, they spend about 3,000 testing days. Now, this was actually a really good test of the model that we use for doing our estimates of effort and time savings, because they did their own calculations looking at live data, and we were within about 2% of our estimates on the number of testing days they do actually deploy. So that was a good test of our model. Again, this customer does a major upgrade in 1 year, and then they're doing either code current events or code modifications in years 2 and 3. And over a 3-year period, they're going to save approximately $600,000, or just under $600,000. So you can see, if you're doing a lot more testing, the savings really do start to mount up. And the third customer we looked at is even larger still, with 2,500 JD Edwards customers. They had 17 testers within IT and 22 end user testers, and they were also using 5 contractors to help out with the testing, which was a more expensive resource. And over a 3-year period, they were spending in excess of 7,000 days testing their JD Edwards system. That their scenario was slightly different, that they were going through a major upgrade project that was going to take the best part of 2 years to actually complete, so that their testing was much heavier in the first 2 years and a little bit lighter in the 3rd year than when they were just doing a code current uplift. But their financial savings over the 3-year period were just under $2 million. So as I say, the more testing you have to do, the bigger the savings are that you're going to make. But how does all this actually help you improve your quality at the same time as saving you time and effort and money with the testing? Well, quite simply, because of the tools we've introduced you to with the Dimension Focus product, it's really going to help you focus specifically on what needs to be testing. So you're not going to be wasting time and effort testing things that do not need to be testing, so you can actually put more effort and be more careful about the way you're actually running your tests. By automating the actual process itself, by using Dimension Focus, as you've seen from the tool, it's very end-user friendly, so end users can manage the tests themselves. There is less scope for actually making errors in setting up the test scenarios, and it's far easier to make sure that they have tested systems thoroughly and have actually got accurate test results, and they can sign off the testing based on good data. And as you've seen from the audit information that Pierre showed you, you've got a complete audit trail of the whole process. And each time anything needs to go back into development to be fixed and then retested, you know the quality of the testing is going to be consistent because it's automated. You're not relying on humans having to do things and having to check things as diligently or not quite so diligently as they did the last time. Dimension Swiftest is taking care of all of that. So overall, a combination of these two products really is going to improve the quality and accuracy of your testing. So to summarize what we've covered today, we've introduced you to 2 products, Dimension Focus and Dimension Swiftest. These actually form part of what we call the Dimension Hub, which is a secure cloud-based application. Using the Dimension Focus product, that's going to help you reduce that number of objects you need to test. And Dimension Swiftest, it's going to reduce the effort required to set up and manage the test. And when used in combination, it's going to reduce your testing effort typically by up to 85%. And for added peace of mind from your side. We've actually put this product through the Oracle Oracle validated integration process, so you know that Oracle have tested as well, and they signed it off that it actually does do what it says, and it does work as we claim that it works. So with that, I would like to open things up to everybody now to raise any questions. So we've got a few questions coming through. This one's a technical one, so I'll let you take this one, Pierre. I'll take the simple ones, but this is one for you. How does Swiftest work with custom objects, field tables, and applications?
Yeah, so Swiftest absolutely does work with customizations. Remember when I did the demo and I showed Swiftest on the right-hand side, it reads the HTML page on the left-hand side, the JDE page that it launched up. So any customizations that you would add to a standard app, or whether it's a copy or a pure custom, whatever, we don't care. Any fields that's available on the JDE screen is available for us to use to build scripts and consume and update and change. So it's fully custom aware.
Great. And a question that we often get, which releases of EnterpriseOne do we support?
So from application release, so it's probably a CNC guy. Application release 9.0 and up, so all the way through to 9.2, it's validated. And tools release 9.1.2. So that's the minimum technical requirements. Any release above that, it works well.
Great. Interesting one here. Again, I'll let you take this one. Does it support record and playback?
No. So we get this one quite a lot from customers. We decided when we developed this not to build in the record and playback. So we believe that creating it from instruction-driven create tests, the way that I showed you, is more useful and more robust. The negatives that we've seen with the record and playback is if you make a mistake while you're doing the recording on step 17, you need to re-record everything all over again. With our approach, if you made a mistake on that last step and you still need to go another 17 steps, you can just change that one event over there. So no record playback.
Yeah, if I can probably add from my own experience as well, working within the testing environment, I did some research about 3 or 4 years ago, and looking at the different generations of testing solutions and how they've evolved over time. Record and playback is a very old approach to testing. It's probably the very first generation of testing solutions, and it is very, very difficult for people to get a return on their investment because of the sheer manual effort involved in using it. Whereas by using the tools that we've shown you today, you can see you're going to get a very, very good return on investment, and it's far easier for people to use. Well, it looks like that's the end of the questions that we've got for today. So I'll just put up our contact details there. I would like to remind people that there is a white paper available for downloading before people leave the session today on the functional testing options available for JD Edwards EnterpriseOne. If you'd like that white paper, do download it before you leave today. I would like to thank you all very much for attending. I hope that's been very, very useful for you. So all of our contact details are on the screen if you'd like to follow us, or you think of a question after the event and you'd like to send that to me, please feel free to do so. And finally, when you do leave the session today, you should be directed to a very short feedback questionnaire. It will take you less than 1 minute to complete. So I do ask you all to complete that because it does help us to make sure that we are presenting what people want to see and that we're doing a good job. So again, thanks very much. Goodbye.